So I've been playing a lot of the re-release of the old Scott Pilgrim vs. the World game back from 2010, and it got me in the mood to watch the movie again for the 1000th time. As a big fan of the movie and an even bigger fan of the graphic novels, whenever I watch the movie there are things that I know the movie is missing that could have made it even better. There are plenty of videos on this little website that talk about the differences between the books and the movies, but I haven't seen as much discussion on why the storylines that the movie excluded matter. There are plenty of character moments and bigger plotlines that make the characters more endearing, and their exclusion takes a lot of meaning away from the movie. This series is widely popular, for good and for bad reasons. A lot of people either love this movie or think it ruined a generation of young adults. I was one of the young adults that were ruined. Maybe I'll be fixed someday, I don't know. Anyways, I want to preface the critiques I have with the movie with the fact that I do love this movie. Edgar Wright is an amazing director and I'm still very much a fan. Also, this movie is hilarious and still makes me laugh to this day.
What's that? You're outside?
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.
When this movie first came out, it was advertised to nerdy dorks who play video games all day, and when I was 14, that sounded like a great movie for me. The issue is that Brian Lee O'Malley originally wrote a story with a very flawed main character, and when the movie didn't make it a priority to show him growing out of being an asshole, a lot of dumb kids like myself at the time missed the point of the story. Scott Pilgrim does not have a redemption arc in the movie, and it leaves a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of people who watched. The problem with cramming a 6-book story into a movie under 2 hours leads to issues being resolved way too fucking fast. But you have to prioritize making the main character likable by the end of the movie. So I'm going to compare story arcs in the book in relation to the movie, but I'm not just here to talk about the differences in the movie. I want to talk about why they matter and what Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was missing. I'm going to start first with the characters. Scott first, obviously. Michael Cera does a pretty decent job of being Scott. The only issue with his performance is that he can never really stop being Michael Cera, especially because he has such a more recognizable role in Superbad. Now, it's not really a knock that he's being himself. Michael Cera's dumb, awkward, skinny guy shtick is always funny to watch.
What? What name? What name? Who are you, Seal?
It's just that the Scott that's written in the books is a bit more tongue-in-cheek and charming. Like, can Michael Cera genuinely get a girlfriend based on how he acts in this movie? Probably, people seem to love him. But anyways, Book Scott has a lot more charisma and I feel like they watered down his personality just to get Michael Cera's big name behind the role. Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona in this movie is just kind of a cold bitch. Not even in a bad way though. It makes sense for her character to be guarded because of the past she's not entirely proud of. That being said, her relationship to Scott in the book is a lot more believable than the one in the movie. There's probably only like 3 scenes where it actually seems like Mary Elizabeth Winstead seems interested in Michael Cera. That's an issue you run into when you cram a year's worth of relationship growth into 2 hours. Ramona in general in the books has a lot more personality. Like, she has a friendship with another character that shows another non-girlfriend side of her that's really endearing. That being said, a lot of teenagers watching the movie fell in love with her because she looks fucking cool, and they have terrorized girls with dyed hair ever since. But I'll get into the issue with the nice guy army that this movie created in a bit. Kieran Culkin played a perfect adaptation of Wallace. His line delivery is exactly how I read Wallace to be speaking in the book. If we're going by today's standards, would it have been nice if Wallace was played by an actual gay dude? Of course. But for the time, I feel like he was well written and nothing really aged poorly with the character. The rest of the cast either does a really good job or the role is small enough where it isn't really significant. Not when it comes to the actor's portrayal at least. Like I said earlier, the books just make a lot of the characters more endearing. Like, I realized on a rewatch a couple years ago that I don't really like many of the characters in this movie. The only characters I really like are Wallace and Julie, but that's mostly because she's played by Aubrey Plaza. Most other characters are either flat or boring compared to the book. If you've never seen the movie and are still watching, I'll give you a quick rundown on all the other main characters. Kim Pine, Scott is in a band and the drummer from his band is his ex from high school. They're friends now, and even though they don't really have beef, you can tell they're not exactly close either. Her story arc in the book is great and she'll be important later. Steven Stills, he's the talent. He's the singer in Scott's band and his arc in the book is a little bigger but not as big as Kim's. Next character, Knives Chow, she's the teenager Scott is dating at the beginning of the movie. Fucking yikes. The book does a better job of making her important and there'll be a lot to learn from her character later. Every other character I'll bring up as they come along in the story and I'll mention if they matter and why. Now we can get into the books and the relationship with the movie. Obviously things we're taking out, they can't fit the whole 6-book story arc into 2 hours. The first book is basically verbatim in the movie, it's pretty clear. The way they adapted the first book is the most comic accurate I've ever seen a movie. Quick rundown of the plot for context. Scott Pilgrim is dating a high schooler named Knives. She's Chinese, yada yada. He sees this new cool alternative girl and decides to risk his life to date her at the same time. In order to date her, he has to defeat her 7 evil ex-boyfriends. Sounds like fun. This is where a lot of the teens that watched the movie turned their brains off and thought, if I'm as desperate as Michael Cera, maybe girls will like me. And that's a big reason why people do not like this movie. The movie doesn't do a good job of calling out Scott and his suck-ass behavior. Scott is a quote-unquote nice guy. He's immature and expects women to like him because he is sincere. This is the case in the book too, but he grows over time. This is partly why I wanted to make this video, because the story gets slandered, but I promise it's better in the books. Anyways, the first ex he has to fight in this section of the story is this kind of dated caricature of an Indian dude. These scenes are pretty cringe if I'm honest, but I was pretty cringe when I fell in love with this movie, so whatever. Nothing important is missing so far except for this plot device brought up in the last couple of pages of the book, where Ramona has these weird little squiggly lines that go above her head whenever she's nervous or anxious. It's called the glow. It's honestly a really great visual cue because it's hard to get as much expression across in a comic. That being said, they could have found a way to do it on screen to show Ramona having hesitations about Scott. Okay, so book 2. Book 2 opens up with a flashback of Scott in high school being followed around by a blonde girl named Lisa. Lisa will be important later, just remember that her and Scott were close in high school and started a band with Kim. This flashback also shows a lot more about Scott and Kim's past, which will be important towards the end of all this. In the movie, they barely cover Scott and Kim's relationship, and Lisa is only mentioned in passing by Aubrey Plaza. Both Kim and Lisa are super important to Scott's growth later in the story. Anyways, back in the movie, Scott is now breaking up with Knives because he's cheating on her with Ramona. This is where you start to see that Scott is an immature dickhead. They don't really make the cheating that big of a deal in the movie, but it is a huge deal in the books. Like in the movie, the book shows Scott getting over hurting Knives very quickly. Scott is 22 and Knives is 17, so in Canada, dating her is technically legal, but still very manipulative. Very manipulative. Wow, that's really hard to say. Very manipulative. Anyways, Scott discards of her as soon as he's done with the ego boost he got from dating her. Like I said, a very flawed character and a dickhead. There's not much else missing from book 2 except for a ton of more time with Scott and Ramona bonding where it seems like they're actually dating. It's like the bread makes you fat date, but for like way longer.
You get fat.
No, why would I get fat?
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
Can we talk about this bit for a second? I feel like it got super popular because it was the first time a lot of people were told that bread is bad for you. I still think about it every time I have more than one slice in a day. Anyways, the ex in this section is Lucas Lee, and honestly the movie does a better job about it than the book. But that's only because Chris Evans plays a really good Hollywood douchebag. That's why he's ridiculously famous now. Like, they did this Zoom call table read last year to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the movie, and as soon as Chris Evans was done reading his lines, he was like, "Sorry guys, I'm too famous to stay to the end of this shit. Thanks for having me though, bye," and he left. It was really funny. Anyways, Scott defeats Lucas Lee / Chris Evans, and before the end of book 2, we meet the ex that broke Scott's heart prior to the beginning of the story, Envy Adams, and her new boyfriend Todd Ingram, who happens to be one of Ramona's exes. They're both in this popular band that had her leave Toronto and leave Scott. Envy is a bigger deal in the book, but Brie Larson was pretty good and her singing in the movie was really good. Even Lil Uzi loves it. That video is great and it always makes me laugh because his friends look so uninterested. Anyways, they did a pretty good job of adapting book 2, but from here on out, the movie moves a lot faster than the books. Book 3. Okay, so book 3 honestly doesn't have that much in it now that I'm rereading it as I'm writing the script. It's a lot of filler that the movie doesn't actually need. The only thing you have to know about this book is that Scott and Ramona start to realize they aren't as compatible as they first thought. They both start to do that thing where people judge their significant others based on who they used to date, which is pretty shitty. In the book, Ramona and Envy actually fight, which is pretty cool. It gives them both more to do and it would make sense that they hate each other. Scott and Todd basically fight throughout the book, but honestly the movie does a good job of it. The vegan police bit, the one where Todd loses his powers and breaks vegan edge, yeah, that one. It still makes me laugh and I've seen it like a million times. Scott defeats Todd and Envy doesn't hate him as much because she found out that she was being cheated on anyway. The book ends with the scene that's missing from the movie though. There's a flashback of Scott and Envy's breakup and we see that they never really got closure and that's why he's been broken up about it for like a year. Anyways, the next 3 books definitely have a lot more missing. Book 4. This book takes a 2-month time skip and we see Scott and Ramona a lot happier at the beginning. It's summertime, the weather's better and all that stuff. This book delves into a lot more detail about Scott's emotional immaturity. At this point, they've been dating for 4 months and Scott really doesn't know that much about her. He doesn't even know how old she is. It's mostly played off as a joke, but that's still pretty bad. This all gets worse when 2 people enter the story. Lisa, who I mentioned earlier, runs into Scott at a mall and he barely even remembers being friends with her. It's actually a common bit in this part of the story that he's a pretty shitty friend. They start to hang out to catch up and he starts bringing her around his group of friends, and Ramona starts to question if they have a romantic past in high school. Meanwhile, Ramona's next ex shows up, Roxy Richter, a woman.
The American people are tired of women.
This is where both the book and the movie objectify Ramona questioning her sexuality in the past. It's aged kind of poorly. Ramona and Roxy kind of meet each other again amicably. They hang out and they discuss things before she has a fight with Scott. This is where the movie really starts to miss out on a good storyline, so I'm going to focus on the book for this whole section. The movie literally skips all of this and has the Roxy fight like 5 minutes after the last one. Either way, Ramona is worried Scott has a thing for Lisa, and Scott is worried about Ramona hanging out with Roxy even though she wants to kill him. I know this all sounds very gossipy, but stick with me here. So Scott and Ramona have an argument about all this that ends pretty poorly. Then, Scott goes home to find his roommate has company over, so he has to find someplace else to stay. Scott ends up staying the night at Lisa's house, where Scott tells her that if he wasn't so infatuated with Ramona, a lot of her baggage would have been a deal breaker. Through this conversation though, Scott now realizes his relationship means a lot more to him, and goes to Ramona's apartment to find Roxy there. Yeesh. Ramona claims it's not a big deal, but he stops her and tells her that he doesn't care and wants to make it work. Wow, how mature. It's almost like he's beginning a redemption arc that should have been in the movie, but what do I know? The fight between Scott and Roxy now has a lot more meaning because it's Scott fighting to show Ramona that he loves her. While at this point in the movie, they're both mad at each other and he does it out of self-defense. This is all obviously very convoluted and would not fit into a 2-hour movie, so I know why it was cut. But when I read this for the first time, I thought it was a lot more engaging to see them struggle and get it together. The book ends with Ramona letting Scott move in with her. How sweet. Book 5. Okay, so book 5 is my favorite out of the 6 because Scott and Ramona are living together and every issue they have gets magnified even more. I haven't mentioned it yet because it wasn't important until now, but Knives has been obsessed with Scott ever since he broke up with her. This begins the storyline that makes the book so much more meaningful than in the movie, because Scott finally has consequences for his actions. One night at a bar, Knives tells Ramona that Scott was cheating on both of them, leading to Ramona knowing that she's probably going to leave him. The rest of the book, you can tell by the dialogue that Ramona still likes Scott, but she doesn't trust him anymore and confides in Kim instead. Ramona and Kim actually have a really great friendship in the books. We get to see her have somebody to talk to, whereas the movie is rarely concerned with her interests. After all this, Ramona then kicks Scott out of her house, and he has to bum at friends' places for the rest of the book. Because of this, Scott spends a lot more time with his friends and starts to become a better friend to them, especially Kim. Later in the book, Scott is trying to patch up his relationship, so Scott, Ramona, and Kim all go to this costume party together where Scott meets Ramona's 5th and 6th exes. They're twins and they're Japanese. They have a lot more character in the book, but that's only because they do not have a single line in the movie. While Scott fights them off at the party, Ramona and Kim get drunk to cope with the upcoming heartbreak. After the party, Scott and Ramona go home and Ramona asks Scott if he cheated on her. He tells her that he didn't cheat on her, but he cheated on Knives with her, very unaware that it's horrible either way. Then, Ramona says, "You're just another evil ex waiting to happen." They use this line in the movie too, but it was over a petty fight way earlier in their relationship. The use of this line in the book is drastically better. In the movie, the breakup isn't that sad because it hasn't even been that long. Anyways, back in the book, the morning after the breakup, Scott finds out that Kim has been kidnapped by the 5th and 6th exes. He thinks defeating them will fix things and goes to save his friend. After the fight, he rushes home to find Ramona and she vanishes right in front of him, leaving him all alone. Scott spends the rest of this book coping and trying to find a new place to live, and Kim moves away to Montreal or whatever. In the movie, this part of the story is fun, but slides down to like 15 minutes. Also, Ramona kinda just ignores Scott for a bit and ends up back with Gideon, her last ex. This all undercuts how well she was able to move on from her past life. Finally, book 6. To address this quickly, I'm well aware that the final book did not come out until after the movie, but they had access to O'Malley while they were writing the movie, so they could have asked him anything. This whole last book fits into like the last 20 minutes of the movie. It's really stripped down. This book starts with Scott being single, one of his best friends moving away, and Steven starts a new band without him. Wallace tries to hype him up and have him have his own little hoe phase, but he's too awkward and sad to make it work. However, he does have conversations with 2 of his exes where they distinctly tell him that he was a shitty boyfriend. After failing his attempt at single life, he goes to visit Kim in her hometown. They have a very lengthy conversation where she tells Scott that he was a shitty boyfriend to her too, and that he should reevaluate himself. He cheated on Knives, he was very absent with Envy, and he lied to Kim. This is where Scott has a fight with Nega Scott, a silhouette version of himself. This fight will not end until Scott embraces the fact that he's been an asshole, which he eventually does. He gains self-respect, apologizes to Kim, and goes to fight Gideon. It's important to him at this point that he's fighting Gideon for himself instead of doing it for Ramona. Nega Scott is the arc for Scott where he finally becomes a worthy protagonist. In the movie, it gets played off as a joke. Anyways, in the book and in the movie, Scott finally meets Gideon. He's this huge hipster douchebag type character. In the movie, he's played by Jason Schwartzman, which is a perfect casting. He plays the role well and actually has his own indie band in real life. I'm not sure if he was even really acting. Anyways, in both the book and the movie, Scott loses the fight but comes back to life to fight again. The major difference here is that in the book, Ramona does not go back to Gideon. In the movie, he puts some dumb brainwashing chip in the back of her neck to control her. It's a lazy way to get to the end of her story. In the book, however, Gideon has the superpower of emotional warfare, and that's why Ramona has that weird glow thing whenever she's doubting herself. It means so much more in the book that a significant other can drastically affect someone's life if they manipulate them. Also in the movie, Scott doesn't admit to being a cheater until like the last 5 minutes and they totally brush it off. Scott does not mature at all throughout the movie. He very weakly apologizes to both Kim and Ramona and they kind of just accept it without question. In the book, Scott and Ramona defeat Gideon and apologize to each other and make up. In the movie, for some reason, Knives gets involved and they all defeat Gideon. The movie has a controversial ending because they initially planned to have Scott end up with the 17-year-old Knives at the end, which does not make sense in either version of the story because she's too good for him. The emotional growth that Scott and Ramona go through throughout the story should lead them to continue their relationship. And that's the end of the story. This is both my favorite comic series and one of my favorite movies. It's the perfect combination of nerdy bullshit from my teens and hipster garbage from my early 20s. It's very fitting for me. The book is a great story that has an arc that shows a character growing over time. The movie is a well-directed, fun popcorn movie that became a cult classic. They're both great in their own way, but the book will always do the characters more justice. Neither are perfect, and like I said before, they're both kinda cringe, but I don't care and I will continue to revisit them frequently. Hopefully, after watching this, you might want to read the books yourself. The movie's still on Netflix, so it's easy to watch there too. The game just came back out too. It's a great time to be a fan of the series. Also, Beck made the soundtrack for the movie and I listen to it all the time, unironically. You should too. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Also, you can follow me on Twitter for more takes on things that do not matter. This video took the life out of me and I have a feeling the next one will too, because it'll be about the wonderful, dumb world of professional wrestling. How exciting. Anyways, thanks again for watching.